What's up, guys? This is Jan for Chess24, and we're gonna look at the highlights of round 2 of a lot of offs in that sentence already of the Chess Olympiad in Baku 2016. I'm not in Baku, I'm not in our studios in Hamburg either. I'm on the road, so bear with me in case the video doesn't look the same, sound the same as you're used to. I'm testing my road equipment. I hope it's gonna be alright. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's have a look at some of the highlights of round 2 of this Chess Olympiad, where most of the favorites still had an easy-ish day at the office. In the open section, Russia crushed Turkmenistan 4-0, and also the other favorites won all their matches, but in some cases there were some individual results that stood out a little bit. For example, Sam Shankland for the USA did not manage to defeat Colin McNabb. Still, the US won 3.5. And then there were some more draws. Seeded, another one that caught my attention, was by a guy with a very cool name of Nicola Capone, who held Wei Yi from China to draw on board 4 in the match Belgium-China. However, it did not really affect the outcome of the match. They lost 3.5. Here we see the final position. Knight takes a3, and after king takes a3, king c4. Of course, there is no way either side can win this game. Another guy who was held to a draw was Mr. Michael Adams from, I believe, England, who tried for 166 moves to defeat another guy with a cool name, Muhammad Ali, but he also was not able to do it, had to go home with a draw. However, England, of course, also winning their match. What else do we have? We have the debut of the world champion for Norway, Mr. Magnus Carlsen, making his first appearance, dealing with the Grandmaster on board 1 for Bangladesh. Carlsen board 1 for Norway, of course, faced the Grandmaster Inamul Hossain, playing for Bangladesh. And Magnus Carlsen opened with a curious move 1e3. Later there were some rumors, but I couldn't get them confirmed, so I'm going to assume it's just rumors, that this was a slip of the hand and Carlsen tried to take it back, but I don't think that's what happened. 1e3, not a bad move. As we can see by the arrows, it gives black a lot of flexibility, but there's nothing that easily equalizes or simplifies the game. Might have been a little device by Carlsen to move order his opponent into something he was unfamiliar with. Let's see if that worked. After knight f6, knight f3, e6, c4. So far so good. Black has a ton of options here. I will probably play d5. But b6 played in the game, also perfectly fine. Knight c3, bishop b7, d4. Bishop to b4. And all of a sudden, after bishop d3, we are in a highly theoretical main line, which you normally reach by playing 1 d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, e3, b6, bishop d3, bishop b7, knight f3, knight e4. There you go, the Nimzo Indian. So Carlsen, in spite of having some fun with the move order, got a mainline position and he knows what to do here. He plays the critical move, short castles, offering a pawn sacrifice on c3. That should not be accepted. Verify it for yourself if you don't believe me. Short castles is better than the move queen c2, when after f5, let's say castles, bishop takes c3, followed by short castles. This queen is not always ideal on c2, and practice has shown that this position is decent for black. However, short castles is tricky, and Hossain decides to play the move bishop takes c3, b takes c. Now refrains from grabbing this pawn, because knight c3, queen c2, as mentioned, is too dangerous. Instead, he plays the more natural move castles. Now queen c2 will once again transpose to the line I just showed you after f5, but white has some bonus options here, and Carlsen chooses the critical one, to move knight to e1. Might look humble, but it's actually a very ambitious concept. White wants to go f3, followed by e4, occupy the whole center without exchanging any pieces, and therefore this knight on e1, which at the moment is not doing much, should be kept on the board and hopefully can make a career going to e3 later on. Here Hossain, in my opinion, commits a small inaccuracy. The theoretical main move is the move f5 after f3, knight f6 back, at least fighting against e4 for the moment, with a complex strategic battle ahead. Instead, Hossain plays the typical Nimzo move c5, but here the timing seems a little off. After f3, this knight has to retreat to f6 anyway, because after knight d6 there would be this little tactic, bishop h7, followed by queen takes d6, which looks like trouble for black. And with the knight having to go to f6, white gets his e4 without being challenged, occupying the whole center and also instantly threatening to pin this knight with bishop g5, which is something you don't want to deal with in the Nimzo, especially after you've already castled. Therefore Hossain understands, of course, something has gone wrong, retreats his knight, stopping bishop g5, but this knight losing a lot of time, and white got the center without any trouble and without any pressure against his weakness on c4 so far. Therefore Carlsen takes an interesting decision here, which I believe is a very good decision, but not obvious. He closes the center with d5. You might think, why would he do that? Shouldn't he keep the position flexible? But no, he's trying to gain space, he's trying to cripple this bishop on b7, and then to slowly but surely build up a kingside attack, transferring the knight to e3 and maybe pushing his pawns over here. And this position is horribly hard for black to defend already. Hossain sticks to normal developing moves, d6, knight c2, knight bd7, knight e3, and knight f6 back, now that bishop g5 is no longer a threat. For the moment things might not look too grim for black, but we will see very soon that these pieces have very limited scope and black hasn't managed to create any pressure against the c4 pawn. Therefore this is already serious strategic trouble for black, and how Carlsen increases his advantage here is very instructive. Starts with a4, which might look like he's hinting to play on the queen side by going a5, but that's not really his idea. Hossain stops any a4, a5 by playing a5 himself. But we see that the point of a4 was really to bring this rook over to help a potential kingside attack very economically. Rook a2, and the rook can go to f2, g2, h2 later. Very nice way to activate the rook. Queen c7, f4, starting to restrict these minor pieces even further. Now there's no longer any knight e5, which wouldn't have helped in the past either. White would just have gone away and then kicked the knight. But after f4 we can see that there's trouble looming on the king side. g4, g5 would be coming next. E takes d might look like a strategic mistake. Why undouble white's pawns? But it's actually a nice little trap. After c takes d, which I'm sure a lot of people would consider the natural move, black would go c5 to c4, and all of a sudden he would gain a lot of counterplay. Knight takes c4, knight to c5, threatening knight takes d3, followed by bishop a6, also threatening, targeting this pawn, and black would be more than fine taking over the initiative. So that was the idea behind e takes d5. However, Carlsen of course can't be fooled like that, and he plays the correct move. E takes d5, keeping all the plus of his position. The double pawn doesn't really matter here. What matters is that none of these pieces, bishop on b7, knight on d7, or knight on f6 have any scope, and the white attack is close to unstoppable already. Rook e8, g4, here it comes. Knight to f8, trying to find some squares for the pieces, but it's not going to help. g5, this knight can't even go active because of the knight e4, queen c2. Well, let's say queen f3. Knight c3, rook a3 would be trapped in the enemy's camp. Not a very tempting future. Therefore it has to stay passive. And once again, Carlsen understands his opponent's intention to go knight g6 and fights against it. There's many good moves here, but I like the way he handles it. He goes h4, just direct against knight g6, so he can harass that knight with h5. Rook a8, h5, and we see these knights are now totally dominated by white's pawns. And Carlsen, in typical Carlsen style, without having to sacrifice anything, pawn or anything, he's built up a devastating kingside attack, and knight g4 just keeps improving his pieces. Rook e7, rook g2, king h8, queen f3, rook e8, desperately hoping to simplify a little bit by going rook e1. Nah, sorry. Covering that square, rook d8 back, shows black has nothing to do. Bishop d2, just activating, improving his pieces to the maximum before doing anything. Rook d8, and now that everything is well placed, Carlsen decides to go for action with f5, which is almost a pity because it gives black's pieces a square to work with, but it is also a winning move starting the final attack, so I can't be too harsh about it. Knight to e5. I'm sure Hossain was happy to at least get some breathing space, but the fun won't last long. After knight e5, rook e5, bishop f4 pronounces all that's wrong with the black position. This rook can't go anywhere. Rook e7 would run into bishop takes d6. So Carlsen could, if he wanted to, already grab an exchange here on e5. However, that would allow the black knight a decent outpost, and there's bigger fish to catch. Therefore, the world champion goes straight for the kill with the move f6. trying to open up the black king after gf, gf, queen g7 checkmate would not be far. Therefore, Hossain tries to keep the position close by going g6, but after hg, fg, turns out that he hasn't managed to keep the position close for very long, because there is bishop takes g6, when after h takes g, well, white has multiple ways to roam. One of them would be queen h4, king g8, rook h2, threatening queen h8, followed by rook h7 checkmate, and there's very little to do about it. For example, knight f8, queen h8, king f7, queen g7, and the game would come to an end. Instead, it came to an end after bishop takes g6, because the black position is absolutely hopeless, so Hossain resigned against the world champion. Probably an easy game for Magnus Carlsen, but still, I believe, a very worthy strategic lesson how he handled the position, how he restricted the black pieces, and how he built his attack. It is worth studying this game in some detail, especially if you want to learn how to fight against the Nimzo Indian, how to play these positions in general. Nice game by Magnus Carlsen. And a much needed win for Norway, who won their encounter only 2.5, 1.5, because I believe Frode Orkedal lost on board 4. So close encounter for Norway, but they also stay with 2 wins. In the open section, a lot of favorites winning their matches, so for surprise we have to turn to the women's section, where there were some, not huge, but there were some upsets. For example, Georgia, traditional powerhouse in women's chess, going down against the Philippines. And here we see a screenshot from the official broadcast where the ladies of the Philippines are awaiting their last game to end, and you can see by the faces they know what's going to happen, and they indeed won their match against Georgia. Big upset there. Some individual upsets as well in the women's section. For example, let's have a look at the final position of the game. Anna Musicuk against Diana Bacu. Anna Musicuk, of course, one of the premier women players in the world, and she took a clever decision here. After move 31, she offered a draw by going a6. You can't offer a draw before move 30, so this was the first position where it was legal. I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong position. The draw happened after a6, and instead of accepting the draw, black could have gone for the little move rook to d1, when my computer, at least, and my computer is pretty smart, claims it's minus 35, or then if you give him some time to think, he claims it's mate in 12 moves after rook d1. There's absolutely no defense because the white queen on a7 can't contribute anything to saving her king on g1. Poor king. Therefore, wise decision by Anna Musicuk to offer draw in time there. Diana Bacu could maybe have strived for more, but I'm sure both sides can live with that draw. I believe that's it already from my highlights report, round number 2 of the Olympiad. Of course, most of the favorites still facing much weaker teams, so we're gonna have to be patient a little bit for the encounters of the powerhouses of the USAs featuring Caruana, Nakamura, Wesley So, the Russias, the Chinas, and so on and so forth. It's gonna be exciting. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope the on-the-road equipment got the job done, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.